if we're stressed during pregnancy, that's one way that your child, not just you, because this is affecting you, but then your child is going to be born with decreased quality of probiotics, because mom, you give your immune system, you give your gut to your child. All right, everybody, welcome to another amazing episode of the Jacque Show. I figured for this episode, just because I brought him up on Instagram, I'm going to have this beautiful face. If you're listening in, go find us on YouTube or watch us on Spotify. You'll see this delightful shirt that I have on. I feel like it's a great one. Anyway, so what are we going to talk about today? Today is going to be, it's one of those things where when we talk about this particular topic, when we talk about mood, we talk about autism spectrum disorders, Asperger's, autism itself, or other types of reactionary or behavioral issues, especially when we're talking about that in kids, I think it's really important to make sure that we address what the current science is actually saying, so that way when parents are presented with this information, they're able to make some proper actions. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because when I was flying back from Fargo, North Dakota, I was fortunate enough to sit next to a lady who was a talker. And usually I don't talk on flights like at all. I'm just one of those guys where I just have my book or my laptop to work on some things. And I just kind of tune out and just go right into what I'm doing. And so I don't know why she started talking. I have no idea. Maybe it was just because I was just trying to be super skinny because I was like in the middle seat and I'm kind of wider up top, so my shoulder, I don't know. Anyways, she starts telling me about her kid, about her son, her family, shows me pictures, and she starts talking about how her son has autism spectrum disorder. And I start going, oh, all right, like let's see what you're doing here. And she's like, this is what he used to look like. This is what he looks like now. We've been going to a natural healer, a holistic, health expert. And they've been doing this, that, the other thing. These are the products that they're on. And now my kid doesn't have the verbal cues that he had before. He's not throwing a temper tantrums like he did before. And he's a lot more personable. And so I'm like, awesome. Like, this is pretty cool. And at the same time, I'm like, I've been listening to this audiobook, the past, 4 days or so. And now this person is presenting themselves to me, asking and knowing about some of the information that I was already just consuming. So it's pretty cool how the universe lined us up. And so we basically talked for 3 hours straight on a plane about health. And so when I got back, I was like, you know what? I need to do a video on this. I need to do a podcast. I need this information to be out here. So this information is going to be pretty heady. So I'm going to try to slow down as much as I can. And as I say that, I'm trying to physically do that, even though it's like trying to compress a spring. It's like, okay, I got this. And then the pressure builds up and the energy wants to come back out again. But I want to make sure that this information lands for you, because this is going to be for your health. This is going to be for your kid's health. This can be for your future child's health. Because when we talk about these types of disorders, autism, it went back and forth. People were like, oh, it's a genetic thing. It happens before the kid's even born. And now a lot of the research is saying, no. These kids are being born and then developing autism or autism spectrum disorders. So what in our environment can be doing that? So I'm wearing my delightful Fauci shirt. So heavy duty, heavy metals, vaccinations, poisoning kids at birth, basically. And then we'll go into it, but the antibiotics, just the standard entry into this world is pure poison. You're born into a sterile environment. Your mom may have had a flu shot during her pregnancy, may have taken some antibiotics for a group B strep strain. You come out and say, I don't know, you just didn't look perfect, according to somebody who has a very low infant mortality rate in these hospitals. And they start drugging you. They start giving you this, that, the other thing. They take you away from mom. They wash you off immediately. So they wash off all of the good bacteria, or they cut you out through a cesarean section so you don't get the proper bacteria. And it's just all of these things, this perfect storm to start these babies off for a very challenging life. And so I'm going to go into where this starts and then do this in a way, and I'm not saying this to be insensitive to those who do have kids with behavioral disorders, autism spectrum, Asperger's, etc. I'm doing this to say like, hey, listen, this is where the science is going. And if your doctor or your physician or your health, your holistic healer didn't bring this information up, you might want to do some of this research on your own. It's really easy to do it. Okay. So as I'm going through this, again, very heady, very nerdy. I try to categorize it sequentially. So like prior to birth, development, foods, what to avoid, etc., to make the biggest impact on your child's health. And I'm really freaking excited. I'm really excited to do this. So let's dive in here. So the gut-brain connection is what we're going to be talking about. And for those of you who listen to previous podcasts, I'm obsessed with the gut. I'm obsessed with gut health and what that does and what impact that has on your health and, again, your child's health and so on and so forth. So when your gut is off, okay, just from a behavioral standpoint, when you are inflamed, okay, your intestines feel like they're bloated and you're just like, the more inflamed you are, the worse or the more dramatic your reaction will be to a very simple stressor. And an example of that is last week or so, my whole family kicked out this stomach bug and everyone was acting like jerks. And I'm like, what in the heck is going on here? I didn't understand it. My son was acting like a butthead. My daughter was acting like a butthead, just fussy, yelling, screaming over like nothing. I'm like, what in the world is going on? And then all of a sudden, the avalanche of vomit came out. I'm like, okay, well, there's some discomfort. And so then I went through that for like 12 hours or so, and my stomach was sour. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is a prime example. This is a prime experience of like when your gut is inflamed. Yes, it's a dramatic example, but when it's inflamed, you could have asked me if I wanted something delicious for dinner, and I'm like, it's freaking figure it out. You just figure it out. I'm shorter. I'm irritable. I'm like, I don't like it. I don't want to think about it. Just do it. Same thing happens here. So if your child is born, and I'll talk about how, but in an unnatural way. And I'm going to say that. And again, this is not to be insensitive. It is factual. It is truthful. If your baby is born any other way than vaginally, it is an unnatural birth. Even if it saved your life or your child's life, it is still considered unnatural. It is an emergency procedure. If you do that or had that done, there are certain things that you're going to have to understand when your kid is born. Because, again, this isn't a death sentence for your child to be born this way. It means that they're born with a kind of a shitty deck of cards, and you have to shuffle that out. You have to be like, reshuffle, give me something else. And so you have to be aware of this. You have to know how this happens. So what they did here, okay, is there was a study in PubMed, Clinical Practice. This was back in 2017. It was called Gut Microbiota's Effect on Mental Health, the Gut-Brain Axis. All right, so you could type this in. And so basically what it did here is it showed maternal mothers' stress. Okay, maternal mothers' stress. And I talk about stress a lot. And when I prep my women to go through pregnancy, stress is something that I never let up on, or maybe it stresses them out that I don't let it go, but it's really important, okay? That stress, that chronic stress upon a mom while pregnant decreases a certain strain of bacteria known as bifidobacterium, okay? So bifidobacterium does a lot of positive things in your body. It is anti-inflammatory. It helps with digestion, absorption, very vital portions of your digestive tract. It's also protective, okay? Now, if we're stressed during pregnancy, that's one way that your child, not just you, because this is affecting you, but then your child is going to be born with decreased quality of probiotics, because mom, you give your immune system, you give your gut to your child. Okay. Babies born vaginally had a better gut microbiota. Okay. So better bacteria and more diversity compared to those born cesarean. Okay. Now, there's a couple reasons for that as well. Yes, there's that natural process going through the vaginal canal, fluid and things, everything pumping out into the baby. But then also when baby is born vaginally, they're more likely to be attached to the umbilical cord for a longer period of time. And that's where we're getting some of those nutrients, those key things going into baby when they're taking their first breath. Mom can tend to hold baby on her body, match her bacteria with baby's bacteria, all that disgustingness on your baby. That's good stuff. You don't want that stuff washed off. If a baby is born cesarean, you have a lesser likelihood of that happening. Usually they're going to cut the umbilical cord really quickly, take the baby from you, run vitals, do an APGAR, all that stuff. It's going to be in a stressful environment. They're going to, again, wash the baby off, wash the bacteria off the baby, and basically give you a sterile baby back. Okay? Now, this is not always, but this is most often. This is what I'm seeing out there, all right, in clinical practice. So women who are out there, and you'll learn more about this, but women who are out there, please, 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 for the health of your child and even for the health of you, please do everything you can to have a natural vaginal birth. Okay, your body will thank you, and your child 10, 15, 20, 30 years will thank you, and you'll thank yourself because your baby will be healthier. Okay, it's very important, especially even with the breastfeeding part. But so we'll talk about breastfeeding next here. So early nutrition is massive here. So they're saying that even if you do worst case scenario, you have the cesarean section, they sterilize the baby, they throw vaccines in your baby, antibiotics, whatever. They just start pounding him or her from birth. Breastfeeding, okay, breastfeeding by itself is another natural thing. You'll see this trend of when you do things naturally, better things happen. When you do things unnaturally, unnatural things happen. The body has to adapt to those new stresses, even though it's not normal for baby to be going through it. All right. Breastfeeding was directly correlated with both IgA levels and a number of different organisms in the Bifidobacterium species. All right. Now, this causes a decrease. Okay. So when the Bifidobacterium go up, then a pro-inflammatory marker known as IL-6 or interleukin 6 is then suppressed. Okay. So breastfeeding is correlated with both IgA levels going up. So when you run a stool test with me, you'll see secretory IgA. That's your immune system for like everything in the body. Anywhere there is a mucosal lining, the sinuses, the mouth, the throat, the lungs, the trachea, the esophagus, all the way down to the anus and rectum and out, all right, you have IgA there. So through breastfeeding, you're increasing baby's natural IgA. Right? You're allowing for their immune system to come back. Now, when we were stressed out during pregnancy, okay, you're going to decrease your bifido species. So you're going to pass less over to your baby. But if you breastfeed your baby, you will then allow for the bifido species to come back up. Pretty freaking amazing, right? Your body's, it's amazing. Women, you're like, oh my gosh, it's amazing. That's why I go nuts when we talk about what other genders there are. There's only two. I'm sorry, guys. There's only two. If you stop listening to me after this, I'll shoot a specific podcast just for you. And maybe I'll do it right after I'm done with this one. So anyways, that is massive. Okay. So breastfeeding increases secretory IgA, increases your Bifidobacterium species, your probiotics. Okay. And you'll see more things that's associated with. You increase that. You decrease interleukin 6. Okay, and you strengthen baby's immune system. So you make them healthier and decrease inflammation just by lashing them on the boob. Okay, now I'm going to take a little tiny segue here, right, and let you know that women who give birth vaginally have a lot easier time with their milk production just due to the different release, oxytocin, like the hormones, everything just tends to work better. Something that's massively important and massively misunderstood, especially when we were back in Pittsburgh, we heard all the time that people were like, hey, you're having a problem with milk production, just put your baby on formula. Like, what the hell? And it'd be like after one day of trying. It's like, no, it takes time for your milk to come in and for that letdown to take place. But you have to keep trying. You have to keep attaching the baby, make sure everything is good. Now, you can have difficulties with tongue tie, lip tie that can make it difficult to feed. But there's basic surgeries you could do for that if necessary. But the milk aspect of it, it's so vitally important, and it cannot be replaced by formula. I don't care how fancy the creators and makers and all that stuff are. It's not the same. It's not mother's breast milk. In fact, there's research that will tell you, and then they've done this, is that if baby has come across a new bacteria, a new bad bacteria, the saliva that attaches to the nipple then goes into mom and says, hey, mom, I know you have experience with this bacteria before. Can you give me some antibodies to beat this off here? That's bad way to say it. To defeat this infection. So mom will pass those immune markers on to baby to be able to build a stronger defense. Like, it's that amazing, guys. It's that amazing. So if you can, please, please, please try. Don't just get a cesarean section out of convenience or because your doctor scared the shit out of you to make you do it. Same thing with breastfeeding. Give yourself time. Stress will decrease your milk output. So the more stressed the doctor makes sure, the more stressed your delivery was or recovery was. If you had a cesarean, that's a strong recovery. And then you go and you try to breastfeed. Give yourself time. Give yourself grace. Give yourself patience, so that way you can get this stuff flowing and you can give your baby some great stuff. Very important. So we have the increase too with the bifidobacterium and even lactobacteria as well, is we see a big correlation to GABA. So when we have bifido and lacto, we have proper regulation of GABA. Mood is a lot better as well, just due to those two species of bacteria being present. The other thing here too with breastfeeding is it also reduces your risk. We talked about the interleukin 6, but it also reduces the risk for age-related gastroenteritis, which is pretty awesome. Okay. So gastroenteritis is probably something that we just went through. Doesn't mean it's never going to happen. And I'm going to do a podcast on like, hey, just because I'm holistic and I'm healthy doesn't mean that I don't get sick. It's just how fast I recover from it. That's your real true testament of your immune system. How fast can I process through whatever this organism is that came into my body? Because I can't just sterilize the world. I'm constantly going to be coming in contact with stuff, especially with 2 kids, right? So big, big, big props to that. The other thing is mother's breast milk, allowed for proper feeding of gut bacteria compared to those with formula, which I thought this is pretty amazing. So there's different constituents in breast milk that act as prebiotic fiber or fertilizer to grow babies' probiotics. Like how amazing, I hope as you're listening to this, you're like, man, like this whole thing is pretty amazing. That's why I love working with fertility. It's because such amazing things happen from the human body, and half of it medical docs don't understand, which makes me so much happier because the more they understand, the more they try to tamper with and make it synthetic. Anyways, keeping on the trend here, the microbiome and the mind, when we have an increased gut permeability, whether it's antibiotic usage, a poor diet from mom, formula fed, what that's going to do is lower your immune function, lower the kid's immune function, and it increases their risk of IBD, irritable bowel disease, diabetes, asthma, psychiatric disorders, including depression, anxiety, and then autism. Okay. And a study that was done by Burris and colleagues suggests that the colonization with Candida, who hasn't had Candida overgrowth, study with Candida and how it can contribute to autism spectrum disorders, particular Candida albicans, most common one. So again, moms, if you are not properly taking care of yourself prior to becoming pregnant, the pre-prep, prior to getting pregnant, you're not running a stool test and you're not checking out your gut and you have underlying Candida that's not corrected, you're going to give your kid extra Candida cultures that they're going to have to work on trying to fight off as soon as they're born. And so what this is showing is that, hey, parents, hey, mom, fix your gut prior to conceiving, right? Give it at least 100 days if you can. Prior to conceiving, make sure that you don't have any candida overgrowth, even bacterial overgrowth, anything like that, because you don't want to give those organisms over to your child. So we have, just moving on from that one, we have the concept of the gut-brain axis. It's not necessarily something that's new. It's been around for a while, and they've been kind of experimenting with this, okay? And they're seeing that there's a lot of correlation now with the gut. So they're seeing this huge correlation to the gut, whether it is too few bacteria or we have too many bad guys that overgrew, opportunistic infections, bacterial overgrowth, candida overgrowth. And one of the things that they have been kind of experimenting with is something that even makes me uncomfortable. It's a fecal oral transplant. Very few doctors are doing this because it's exactly that. You take fecal matter from somebody who is considered to be healthy. They have a good gut microbiome, and sometimes they'll put it in a pill and you'll swallow it. Sometimes they'll do a nasal wash of sorts up there, and they're seeing massive benefits with autism spectrum disorders. Pretty freaking cool. So when we talk about, hey, my kid got diagnosed with this, that, or the other thing, do a checklist real quick. Did I have a cesarean birth? Did I have this? Did I formula feed instead of breastfeed? It's not oh my gosh, look what I did to my kid. It's okay, now that we know the facts here, what can I do from a supplemental standpoint to get this kid to function properly? I mean, there's a lot of stuff. You can do some N-acetylcysteine. Again, this is with proper guidance. Easy things, all right? Make sure the diet is nice and clean. What foods to avoid with kids with certain behavioral type disorders? Avoid dairy, okay? Avoid gluten. Avoid corn, soy. Avoid any type of artificial colors, red dyes, any other type of dyes, okay? Avoid any other excitotoxins. There are drinks that can sometimes contain 0 sugars. There's fake sugars, sucralose, or I know that there's a sulfame K. It's not an artificial sweetener, but they call it ACE K. It's an excitotoxin that causes your brain to basically explode, which causes neuroinflammation, spikes cytokines, makes for a messy situation. Okay, avoid Halloween candies. It's the stuff that that you should be doing, but you didn't know how big of an impact it can have on your child's health. Past that, make sure your kiddo is getting a great diet and getting some good healthy fats in, right? Because remember, brain's basically fat. Now, yeah, it uses glucose, but at the same time, if we don't have proper fat constituents in our body, then we're not going to be able to repair any type of brain tissue or reduce inflammation through healthy fats. Things like avocados, avocado oil. We can do olive oil as long as it's extra virgin olive oil, as long as it's not cooked with or tampered with or heated up, because it goes rancid very quickly. Coconut oil or caprylic acid, MCT oils. Those types of things are really good. Things to stay away from are the more inflammatory plant-based oils, canola, safflower oil, okay? Those ones have a tendency to be very inflammatory, especially to the human body. So reduce as much inflammation as you can. The more we can do to work with our kids, the more we can do to balance their guts, the better they can be. And I've worked with numerous cases like this. And one of them, okay, was somebody that was near and dear to me. Their kid came into my office and they're like, you know what? My kid is rocking back and forth. He's somewhere on the spectrum. They won't necessarily diagnose him, but he has tendencies to have autism, tendencies to be a little bit more Asperger's, some OCD, and they're like, I don't know what to do. But the kid was rocking back and forth in school during nap time, and the teacher was really concerned and contacted this parent. And the parent was like, well, I don't really know what else to do. So she brought him into me, and I remember him, he was an awesome kid. He was just very, very crazy in terms of energy, and just he needed everything to be very methodically stacked. And if anything got knocked over, he would lose it and fly off the handle and go nuts around the office. And it was fine. But what did we do? We coached on diet and lifestyle. We ran a stool analysis on him as well. He was young. Ran a stool analysis on him. And then what happens? We removed the infections. We healed the gut. And I remember getting a letter from the mom a year later on Thanksgiving, giving thanks that her kid was back to normal. And as long as they don't feed him inflammatory foods anymore, things that would cause an imbalance in gut bacteria or an increase in inflammation, then they have their kid back. And the kid does well in school, super smart, everything's positive, everything's happy. And it's all because you ran the right tests, they did the right treatments, the right protocols that were specific for that patient's needs. So upon doing that, the patient had no other choice, the kid had no other choice but to be better because he was less inflamed. He was able to explain himself, express himself, and be himself. So the gut, guys, the gut is so massively important. And this podcast isn't to sell a stool test. It's just to empower, from a dietary standpoint, what we feed our bodies is what our bodies are going to become. And it's not a whole you are what you eat kind of mentality, but in a way it kind of is. And so if you're eating McDonald's every day, it's like building your house or building your body out of straw, like the Three Little Pigs, And then if you have a person who's eating, whole foods, healthy foods, tons of veggies, good, grass-fed beef, protein, those types of nutrients that are just very satisfying and nourishing to the body, then that body's going to be built out of bricks. And so what type of house do you want to build? Do you want to build a house out of bricks, or do you want to build a house that's out of straw and you're just waiting for a strong wind to come and blow it over? Because that's what happened in the last couple of years. So many people spent, 5, 10, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years building their bodies out of straw. And then a wind came through, ripped through, people died. People lived in fear. Remember that fear, stress is going to decrease that secretory IgA, cause an increased expression of bad inflammatory cytokines, decrease good bacteria. And it just led to a real pandemic of just unhealthiness and the realization that we maybe have been misled this entire time. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to build out this podcast, guys, is because I need to find a way to get this information out to the masses. And I need y'all who are listening to please help me with this. If it's a topic that you want me to speak on, I would be happy to do it. And I've got a list that I'm still going through to make. So if you've already told me something, I'm getting there, I promise. But I need you guys to get this information out by spreading this. Share these podcasts. Let people know that this is out there. It's a free, useful tip that they can use. I'm trying to shrink the videos or the audios down shorter so that way you don't have to spend a full hour with me. But the more we can trickle this information into society, and this message may not be for you. You may be like, I already know this, but you've been trying to tell your sister who's got a kid who has behavioral disorders, and you're like, well, she won't listen to me, but she might listen to somebody else. And so just throw my podcast at her. And if she gets mad at somebody, she can get mad at me. It's okay. I'm used to making people very uncomfortable all the time. I'm fairly confident I do that on a daily basis. But that level of discomfort is what allows us to get the results where other systems have failed. And so I'm going to keep on that journey. I'm going to keep on that message so that way we can get health, wealth, and longevity, so that way we can rewind the hands of time and stop fearing these viruses or fearing this new whatever that they're going to make to scare us with. Because the more we walk with confidence, the more we walk with power, the less they can take from us, because we are powerful. We are full of power. So hopefully this message resonated with you. I started off in one location, ended up in another location, but I loved all of it. Hopefully you did too. So thank you for tuning in again today. We'll see you next time.